Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the top 10 topics of the day for October 25th, 2021. So, the first topic of today is Prime Minister Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission. As you can see, that the name itself includes that it is a health infrastructure mission. So, the Pradhan Mantri Modi had launched this mission today in Varanasi, and the Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission caters to the rural and urban health infrastructure in the country. It will support 17,000 rural health and wellness centers in 10 high focus states and 11,000 urban health and wellness centers across the country. The scheme is touted to be India's largest scheme to scale up health infrastructure. It is aimed to ensure a robust public health infrastructure in urban and rural areas, capable of responding to public health emergencies or disease outbreak. For example, the recently experienced COVID-19 pandemic. We had seen that during the pandemic, India lacked the sufficient infrastructure to deal with the pandemic on such a large scale. Ahead of the launch of Prime Minister's inaugurated 9 medical college from Siddharth Nagar in Uttar Pradesh. So why did the government plan for the scheme? Let us look at this. Now, the mission aims at ensuring a robust system for detecting, investigating, preventing, and combating public health emergencies and disease outbreaks. As you can see, detection, investigating, preventing, and combating are the four most important steps to deal with any health emergency and disease. For this, now 17 new public health units will be set up, while 33 existing public health units will be strengthened. It will also train the frontline and the health workers to respond to public health emergencies so that they are capable and well skilled to deal with any emergency in the future, both in rural and urban areas. Now, it increases the accessibility to health in rural and urban areas. The mission's objective is to fill the critical gaps in public health infrastructure. This is a very important point. Critical care facilities and primary care. This will ensure access to critical care services in all districts of the country with over 5 lakh population through exclusive critical care hospital blocks. Now, the remaining districts will be covered through referral services. The integrated public health labs will also be set up in all the districts to access a full range of diagnostic services. It should be remembered that diagnostic services are severely lacking in the rural areas. It also aims to establish a IT-enabled disease surveillance system through a network of surveillance laboratories from the lower level block level to district, regional, and national centers, having a fully integrated health infrastructure. All the public health labs will be connected to this integrated health information portal, which will be expanded to all the states and UTs from the present 10 states. Apart from this, the mission will also set up other infrastructure like the National Institute for One Health, 4 National Institutes for Virology, regional research platform for WHO Southeast Asia region, 9 biosafety level 3 laboratories, and 5 regional center for disease control. So what is the significance of this mission? A study was recently conducted by Lokniti CDSS in 2019. It highlighted how access to public health care remained elusive to those living in the margins. 70% of the locations have public healthcare services, meaning the rest 30% is left out. Availability was less in rural areas, which was only 65%, meaning the 35% is still to be catered to. In urban areas, it is 87%, meaning the 13% is still left out. Now, the Pradhan Mantri launched another scheme, Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. It is a flagship digital initiative involving creation of not just a unique health ID for every citizen, but also a digital healthcare professional and facilities registry, bringing both the citizen and the digital healthcare professionals onto one platform. It is very important for your mains to first know what is the mission or any program or policy about, and this information covers the very step of that. It is helpful in the paper 2, GS paper 2, policies of the government related to health, and also the governance part of the GS mains paper in paper 2. It will also help you to write a very good essay on the recent steps to taken to augment the healthcare facility in the country in the backdrop of the coronavirus pandemic. The second most important topic is the amended Technology Upgradation Fund scheme. Now, this scheme caters to the textile sector. Let me remind you, it was just one day behind that we had discussed of PM Mitra scheme, which is going to set up integrated textile parks in various states. So this scheme is a scheme which is from existence from long time itself, almost from 1999. It deals with the credit linked subsidy scheme intended for modernizing and technology upgradation in Indian textiles. Technology plays a very important role in the Indian textile industry. Now, with the aim of making Make in India and zero defect, zero effect in manufacturing, the government provides credit linked capital investment subsidy. This scheme will facilitate augmenting investment, productivity, quality, employment, exports, and import substitution in the textile industry. The TUF scheme was amended recently to boost ease of doing business, exports, and push employment. The Ministry of Textiles had introduced the scheme in 1999, as I said, for modernization and technology upgradation of Indian textiles. Now, the ongoing amended TUF scheme was approved in 2016 and it is implemented through a web-based iTUFs platform. Now, recently, the Ministry of Textile had reviewed the implementation of this. So, certain changes were brought to ensure ease of doing business and also in ease of setting up of textile manufacturing centers. It reduces the compliance burden by accepting only a single certificate from the concerned bank instead of multiple documents. This is streamlining of the process, rationalization of the GR related cases of consortium finance, consideration of standalone embroidery machines with effect from inception of the amended Technology Upgradation Fund scheme, that is from 2016. The third most important is the China has brought out a new law that formalizes its LAC actions, line of actual control, along its border with India. Now, a new law was proposed by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. National People's Congress is the highest legislative body of China. India and Bhutan are the two countries with which China is yet to finalize the border arrangements, while it has resolved its boundary dispute with 12 other countries. China has a 22,000 kilometer land border which it shares with 14 countries, and I will be showing you in the forwarding slides. So recently we had seen that India and China had been having a tense relation, especially with respect to border areas in the Aksai Chin region. The 13th Corps Commander level talks had ended in a stalemate, and recently China had also expressed its criticisms with regard to the Vice President visit to Arunachal Pradesh, claiming that Arunachal Pradesh is a part of China, that is Tibet, and not part of India. It has also depicted this in its maps, which India strongly criticizes. Now, this is the first time that China has brought a law that governs its land borders. It asserted that sovereignty and integrity of China are integral and inviolable. The law stipulates that the state will take measures to strengthen the border defense, support economic and social development, as well as opening up the border areas. It will improve public services and infrastructure in the border areas, encourage support to people's life and work there, and promote coordination between the border defense, social, economic, and development in border areas. Its simple words, it lays down a roadmap for its action in the border areas of China. Now, the members of the Standing Committee approved a law at closing meet of legislative session. This law becomes operational from January 1st, 2022. It shall take measures to safeguard the integrity and land boundaries. It gives relevant responsibility to the People's Liberation Army, militia, local government to support and coordinate defense and build border infrastructure. Now, the law states that China will develop the border towns and improve overall capacity in these border towns. Regarding the negotiation with the neighboring countries, it says that it will follow the principle of equality, mutual trust, friendly consultation, and handles such affairs with neighboring countries through negotiations. India has reiterated developments along the LAC in eastern Ladakh have seriously disturbed the peace and tranquility in the border areas. We'll have to wait and watch and see what steps China will be taking in this regard, especially in the border areas between India and China and our neighbor Bhutan and China. While India-China border dispute covers 3,400 long LAC, China-Bhutan dispute covers 400. The new land border law was adopted amid a standoff between India and Chinese militaries in the eastern Ladakh. China and Bhutan assigned an MOU, firming up a three-step roadmap for expediting the boundary negotiations, which Beijing said it will make a meaningful contribution to speed up the border talks. I've given you a map in the previous where you can see the countries that border the Chinese along the land border. The fourth most important is the use of anti-drug fund for de-addiction by the Ministry of Social Justice. Now, looking at de-addiction and dealing with drug-related issues, making policies, programs for de-addiction and helping those who are involved in this menace is the responsibility of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. The Social Justice and Empowerment Ministry now has recommended that the National Fund to Control Drug Abuse must be used to carry out de-addiction programs rather than using policing activities to prevent drug abuse. There have been recent cases where children of few film stars have been included in the drug abuse case, and also there have been analysis who have been criticizing the way the law is being implemented in the country, because there is a difference between those who possess the drug for personal use and those who possess the drug with the aim to make commercial benefits by trafficking in drugs. According to this plan, persons caught of small quantities of drugs for personal use will be directed to rehabilitation instead of being prosecuted and sent to the jail. The Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985 has a nominal corpus of 23 crore rupees in this fund. The fund is mentioned in this act. Under this act, the sales proceeds of any property that is forfeited of persons who have been convicted in such issues, grants made by the persons, institutions, income from the investment of the fund will go towards this fund, named as the National Fund to Control Drug Abuse. The Act states that the fund will be used to combat illicit trafficking of narcotics, rehabilitation addicts, and preventing of drug abuse. Let us look at the extent of the menace in our country. Now, according to the National Crime Records Bureau report of 2020, a total of 59,000 cases were lodged under the Act, of which 33,000 cases pertain to possession of drugs for personal use and 26,000 cases deal with possession of drugs for trafficking. The number of drug users in the country is in crores. According to the Social Justice Ministry and All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the magnitude of substance use in 2019, there were 3.1 crore cannabis users and 2.3 crore opioid users. The law makes a difference between drugs users and commercial drug dealers. The law clearly defines different categories. The punishment for those found in commercial quantities is higher than those found in small possession, can be rehabilitated and led to de-addiction. Ministry of Social Justice is already implementing a program called as a Scheme for Assistance of Prevention of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. The other next important topic is switching to gas for firing of power plants will not be easy, says the experts. Now we have seen recently that there has been shortage of coal, and the brunt of this has been experienced by the thermal power plants which run on coal, leading to power shortages in comparison to the demand in various states. So there has been a talk and a discussion making rounds that there should be natural gas used for producing of power and reduce dependence on coal. This write up is regarding that. However, there are certain considerations and challenges pertaining to this, and analysis say that the energy analysis say that natural gas cannot be used to be dependent on totally, and there should be a mix of power generation in the form of coal, natural gas, and renewable power rather than only totally depending on natural gas. In the immediate future, the use of natural gas in industries, transport, and homes will enable to move away from highly polluting coal, it says, but it must only be used as a transition fuel. This is because the renewable energy production, that is from wind and solar, is intermittent and dependent on weather conditions. For completely renewable energy based economy, if you move aside coal, India will need to store power, but the battery storage is currently expensive in India. So India will have to work on this, and also hybrid transmission of power. There have been discussion that the government should encourage rooftop solar power plants, especially in those areas which have more than 200 days of sunlight. India should plan specific policies on natural gas that it will make it a bridge leading to renewable based economy. Otherwise, we will be stuck with one or more fossil fuel which we will have to battle in the next 15 to 10 years down the line. Using of natural gas reduces greenhouse gas emissions, as the combustion of natural gas emits about half as much as carbon as the coal. Now, India has committed to install 450 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. 100 gigawatts has already been installed by August 2021. Eventually, India plans to use renewable energy as a predominant fuel source. Half of India's natural gas is produced within the country, and the other half is imported from Qatar, Australia, and the US, among other countries. India is also trying to diversify the sources of natural gas by partnering with countries such as Russia. I have mentioned 2 to 3 challenges that are posing here to the adoption of natural gas for power production. Shifting to gas as a source of power in the power plants may not be an easy option for government, because availability and the cost of the blue fuel would pose a challenge for electricity producers and consumers. We depend on coal for 70% of our energy needs, and gas, hydro, and nuclear cater to 16 to 17%. CRISIL research has found that coal based power generation has increased by 19% year on year. But on the other hand, if you take generation from other conventional sources like gas, natural gas, it has witnessed a decline of 16% annually. Gas prices are also volatile. This will affect the power generation. India's gas infrastructure should be planned in such a way that it can be repurposed for renewable and green hydrogen technologies eventually, says the analysis. Also, natural gas is used in various other industries such as fertilizers. It is said that if natural gas is being used for power production, then those industries will suffer. Therefore, there needs to be a lot of planning, consideration, and a proper framework to use a mix of fuels of coal, natural gas, renewable energy for the power production in India. And India's journey should move eventually to be dependent on renewable energy sources for its power. The next most important is misinformation and hate speech in FB. Now, this is an article about a whistleblower in Facebook. He showed the internal documents that they show a struggle of misinformation, hate speech, and celebrations of violence in India. Now, the documents are a part of material collected by an engineer and a whistleblower, Francis Haugen, a former Facebook employee, who testified before the US Senate about the company and its social media platforms. The internal documents includes details on how bots and fake accounts tied to the country's ruling party and opposition figures were wreaking havoc on the national elections in the country. We have seen recently social media has been playing an important role in the elections. In a separate report produced after 2019 national elections, Facebook found that over 40% of the top views or impressions in the Indian state of West Bengal were fake and inauthentic. This has an impact on the expression of election or the implementation of the right to elect your representative, because the person who is going to put a vote is always guided by fake information where he cannot make the best decision ever. Facebook researchers wrote that these groups and pages are replete with inflammatory and misleading anti-Muslim content on social media platform. It says that the intention of the founder Mark Zuckerberg to focus on meaningful social interactions is now leading to misinformation in India, especially during the pandemic. We had seen that social media was both used properly and also misused during the pandemic period, where there were various posts creating a sort of tension and fear among the people regarding the vaccines. On the other hand, social media had helped many people to get access to oxygen, to medical facilities, medicines which were not available at certain places. Facebook said that it is taking steps such as fact checking of partners, such as employing third party network to outsource fact checking and increase the amount of steps to remove the misinformation. Now, exercising your information right on the social media comes under Article 191A of freedom of speech and expression, and this can be restricted on certain grounds. It is not absolute. Therefore, this right can be restricted in the interest of sovereignty and integrity, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign state, public order, decency, morality, and relation to contempt of court, defamation, or incitement to an offence. Time and again, the Supreme Court has also expressed its dissatisfaction in the method how fake information and misinformation is making rounds in the social media. The social media company, along with the government, has to take steps to check the menace. The next most important is China using pandemic as an excuse to block Indian imports. Now, recently at the WTO, while China's trade policy review was going on, India criticized China's non transparent trade policy and regulatory system. India has accused China of using excuse of COVID-19 contamination as a pretext to block many Indian exports, particularly seafood, and has sought engagement with Chinese authorities to find ways to bridge the huge trade balance. India has been raising the imbalance of trade with China time and again, and many countries are taking such COVID 19 excuse of contamination as a pretext to block exports from many countries, and this has become a challenge, especially to boost growth in the post pandemic era. India was particularly critical of the non tariff barriers that the country is continuing to erect against the Indian imports, especially at the time of a pandemic. India was critical of the lack of efforts towards bridging the trade gap. India raised the alarm of use of sanitary and phytosanitary measures by China has risen steeply with unscientific use of COVID-19 contamination to block Indian exports including seafood. Now, Indian pharmaceutical companies too are not able to get the market approvals for the generics in China. Those approvals, which actually take 5 to 6 months in globally, are taking now up to 3 years in China. India has asked China to address the 46 billion trade deficit, the highest that it has with any trading partner. India has also pointed out that China has not fulfilled the promise of providing market access to 17 farm products. This is a small information about the economic relations between India and China and the recent challenges that India is facing, especially with regard to covering the trade imbalance. I've given you the data here showing you the top 10 trading partners of India. We can see it is United States, China, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Germany, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and South Korea. India has a trade surplus only with United States, but with the others, if you see in the column of trade balance, India has a trade imbalance, and the most is with China, that is 48.65%. Then you can see it is the next most highest is with Switzerland, third Saudi Arabia, fourth Indonesia, South Korea, the least comes from UAE. Another important news is about the International Financial Services Authority announced new rules to boost the reinsurance business in the country. Now, the country is all set to become a reinsurance hub. We had seen recently that the government has improved the privatization, especially in the insurance sector, to improve both life and non-life insurance products. And the medical insurance we had seen had got a boost during the coronavirus pandemic. Also, government is aiming to boost the insurance sector because it is an important form of social security and also constitutes an important manner in which the people of the country can save. Now, the International Financial Services Center Authority, which is the first regulator of the IFC in Gujarat, announced new liberal regulatory regime for facilitating formation of various international and Indian insurance business in the gift city of Gujarat. The regulations for setting up the insurance offices and the intermediary offices were notified by the regulatory authority on October 22nd. So, reinsurance, to just get a brief idea, is a type of insurance that is purchased by insurance companies to reduce their risk. It is nothing but insurance for the companies which provide insurance to the people. It is a tool used by insurance firms to minimize their liability or to mitigate their exposure in case of a catastrophic incident. Reinsurance allows the companies to limit their losses so that they can carry on their businesses very smoothly. The new regulations will help India to develop a global reinsurance hub in the country, which will compete with offshore financial centers such as Singapore, Dubai, Hong Kong, making India another hub of reinsurance in Asia. This will also give a backing to the insurance sector in the country to reduce their risk or to minimize their liability and also to mitigate their exposure. So, along with improving the privatization in the insurance sector, developing and improving competition, giving a boost to a wide range of insurance product, now the step by the International Financial Service Authority will give a boost to the business by providing a new liberal regulatory regime for facilitating the development of international and Indian business insurance business in the gift city. With this, the non-insurance entities can start insurance and reinsurance business in the gift city, and insurance companies in India can also set up their subsidiaries. Under the new regulations, foreign reinsurers and insurers can set up their office in the gift city of Gujarat. The next most important topic is with regard to stubble burning. As winter approaches, now it is again a time of challenge of pollution in Delhi. So, every winter, the national capital and surrounding NCR have been grappling with the severe air pollution from multiple sources such as dust, vehicular emissions, as well as meteorological conditions like low wind speed, temperature, and humidity. Stubble burning adds to this problem. While Delhi enjoyed a cleaner pre winter period from September 1st to October 15 this year, this was attributed to the delayed rainfall and paddy harvest by Punjab and Haryana, which was said by the Center for Science and Environment. In the diagram, you can see that the particulate levels have been increasing since 2018, and this data has been got from the SAFAR. Also, the fire counts have been high in 2020, though it has been seen reducing from 2016 in Punjab and also in Haryana. It has been reducing from 2016. Again 17 it was increased, it reduced again in 2018. 19 there was 2755 numbers of fire events, that is stubble burning events in Haryana. It reduced in 2020 because of the pandemic period, and 2021 it has picked up pace because of the improvement agriculture activity. There have been alternatives such as the Pusa biodecomposer, which has been developed by the Indian Agriculture Research Institute to aid the decomposing of crop residue, which has been touted as an alternative activity to setting fire to the paddy crop in the fields, the residue of the paddy crop. The Delhi government has begun spraying the solution covering 4,000 acres out of nearly 14,000 acres, but we can see that a large percentage of land has been left out, like almost 10,000. The Punjab government has procured decomposer through license to cover 3,000 hectares, while Haryana government has covered almost 1 lakh hectares and the UP government 10 lakh hectares. But if you compare this land covered in comparison to the total percentage of land that has been cultivated for paddy, it is very less. Also, some farmers want to grow. The reasons are many for this. One is the farmers want to grow the vegetables and the fruits in between the crops, and therefore they prefer burning down the stubble rather than using the decomposer to wait for a longer time, as the gap between the harvesting and the sowing for the next season is very less. The happy seeder, which cuts down the straw and sows the seed for the rabi at the same time, remains out of reach for the farmers, especially the small and marginal farmers, because of the cost. The Punjab Preservation Subsoil Act was enacted recently to arrest the declining groundwater levels. Now, this act has delayed the sowing date to a much later period to gain with the monsoon rainfall, so as to reduce the burden on the groundwater. Consequently, what has happened is the harvesting has delayed, and so this has reduced the time needed to manage the stubble and prepare for the next crop. Along with this, as the harvesting is delayed, now the stubble burning has synchronized with the shift in the wind experienced in October. Therefore, the winds blow towards Delhi and make the situation more worst. The farm fires in the month of September usually do not affect Delhi because the winds are southwesterly. And the last topic of today is about the Conference of Parties under the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. These are the important COPs where certain important decisions have been taken. 2021 COP26 in Glasgow. It was supposed to be held last year, and now they will decide a rule book for implementing the Paris Agreement, which is still to be finalized. The main remaining hurdle is the agreement over creation of a future carbon market and transition of pending carbon credits with some developing countries. So, if you just know these important points now, when the news comes up during the COP meeting from October 31st, it will be very easy for you to understand what the discussions are going about regarding and where the steps are moving towards. In 2015, COP21 Paris. Now, the successor agreement was finally delivered to Kyoto Protocol. Paris Agreement came into being. Paris Agreement, let me remind you, does not assign emission reduction targets to any country. Instead, it asks all to do the best that they can. But then it says that the targets that they set for themselves must be reported and verified in the form of NDCs, nationally determined contributions. The objective, however, of the Paris Agreement is to limit the global rise in temperatures to within 2 degrees from the pre industrial time. In 2017, the COP13 had taken place. Now it reaffirmed the principles of common but differentiated responsibility in the efforts to find a replacement to the Kyoto Protocol, which developed countries were getting increasingly uncomfortable with. So the developed countries want the emission reduction targets for everyone, or for nobody. They argue that without stringent action from developed countries such as China and India, the success of any climate action would not be possible. In 1997, the COP3 led to the Kyoto Protocol. It delivered the Kyoto Protocol, which is a precursor to Paris Agreement. The protocol assigned specific emission reduction targets for a set of developed countries to be achieved by the year 2012. Others were supposed to take voluntary actions to reduce emissions. Kyoto Protocol expired last year as the Paris Agreement took its place. In 2009, COP15 at Copenhagen, there was an attempt to finalize a new agreement which ended in failure. Developed countries committed to mobilizing 100 billion every year for climate finance to developing countries from 2020. There is a lot of criticism in this regard because this commitment has not been fulfilled. And the basis for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the mother agreement that lays down the objectives and principles on which climate change by countries are to be based, was agreed to in the Earth Summit at 1992 at Rio de Janeiro. So these are the important topics of today. See you tomorrow with another list of important topics. Until then, bye bye.